10 must-have players I'm going to be trying to draft in every single one of my best ball and even home leagues. And that first player on my list today is Saquon Barkley. Not only is the value to me incredible, but also the upside. I mean, he's going from a terrible offensive line with my beloved New York Football Giants to an elite offensive line with the Philadelphia Eagles. In his career, I looked at his career with the Giants and now going to the Eagles. Look, the offensive line, according to PFF's grades, the Giants have been bottom 5 almost every single year outside of 1, okay? The Eagles have been top 5 every single year outside of 1 year, which is 2020, as you can see. Saquon Barkley being 1 out of 5 running backs as well to be averaging over 15 fantasy points in the past 2 games behind the 3rd offensive line in the league is pretty crazy. Coming out of the 2023 season, there is no question that Saquon can continue his success in the Philadelphia Eagles. And we saw last year DeAndre Swift with those big gaping holes. If you know, you know. Shout out to Pat McAfee's show. Just felt like every other play DeAndre Swift was ripping it one down the field, right? Swift on the Eagles had a career high in yards in 2023. And I know a lot of people are a little bit concerned about the tush push. I'm not necessarily concerned. They bring in Saquon Barkley, who arguably could bench just as much or even more than Jalen Hurts on the goal line, specifically in that tush push, whether they're taking it away or whether or not they're going to be giving the ball to Saquon Barkley. Last year, let me remind you, Jalen Hurts had a total of 15 rushing touchdowns, and the Eagles' backfield as a whole had a total of 7. I do believe they want to protect Jalen Hurts going into this year, get less hits on his body, specifically on the goal line, and give that to Saquon Barkley. And that is my first player today. My second player on this list is Amari Cooper. A lot of people in the fantasy community remember Amari Cooper's success specifically last year without Deshaun Watson. But let me remind you what he was doing when Deshaun Watson was on the field. He played 5 games with Deshaun Watson. I know Deshaun, he was in and out of games all last season, dealing with those injuries. Hopefully he's going to be healthy going into the 2024 season. But in the 5 games that he played with Deshaun Watson, look, week 1 obviously was terrible. That was like that monsoon game where they were playing the Cincinnati Bengals. Even T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow all had bad games on both sides of the ball, but he had 6.7 fantasy points. Week 2, caught 7 out of 10 for 90 yards, 16 fantasy points. Week 3, over 24 fantasy points. Week 9, again, over 24 fantasy points. In week 10, over 15 fantasy points. In that span, in those 5 games, he was averaging 6 receptions, 8 targets, just under 100 yards, and 17.6 fantasy points within those 5 games. What does that look like in a 17-game pace with Deshaun Watson when he's on the field? We know that Deshaun Watson has and can produce fantasy relevant wide receivers. He just needs to stay healthy and on the field and gain rhythm and chemistry with Amari Cooper, which we saw once again a small glimpse of going into this year, and he is my second must draft player. All right, let's slide into the tight end position. My third player on this list, Mark Andrews. A lot of people forget about Mark Andrews and what he was doing before he got injured, and the fact that he was playing with an injury all in the first half of the season. Remember, coming into the 23 season, he missed a couple preseason games. He missed week 1, and he didn't see the field until week 2. But let me tell you what he did while he was playing with an injury from weeks 2 to 11, 45 receptions, 61 targets, just over 540 yards, 6 touchdowns, averaging 13.5 fantasy points per game. He was the tight end 4 within that span. During that span, he was averaging more fantasy points than Sam Laporta, Evan Ingram, David Njoku, Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid. He is still the #1 target in this offense. The Ravens got rid of OBJ last year, who really didn't make a huge impact. They had multiple opportunities to draft a wide receiver in this deep wide receiver class coming out this year. It's Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers. Okay, Mark Andrews is clearly the #1 target. Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman as number 3 if he can stay healthy. Let me also remind you, as I end this take, Mark Andrews finished outside the top 10 only one time in his 6-year career on a points per game basis. Every other year, he finished as a top 5 tight end. The only time he didn't finish as a top 5 tight end, guess, his rookie year in 2018. I mean, come on. That is crazy that we are passing up this guy who has finished, once again, a top 5 tight end almost his whole career. And we are kind of letting him slide at times to round 5, to round 6, to round 7. Not round 7. Round 7 is kind of pushing him, but normally round 5, we see him slide when in reality should potentially be going in round 3 and clearly in round 4. My next guy on this list, the cockroach himself, quarterback Kyler Murray. If you know, you know. And he's completely being undervalued in the community. I mean, in one quarterbacks in our mock drafts, sometimes an Underdog, whatever platform you use, he's going around round 8 or 7, depending on, once again, your league or draft. That is a tremendous value for a quarterback, and his career has finished as a top 5 or even top 7 quarterback in a points per game basis. As you can see in 2022, quarterback 3 in a points per game, 2021 QB4, 2022 QB7, and this past year in 2023, mind you, where he only played 8 games, he matched his same points per game in 18.9 that we saw in 2023. Imagine what that potentially could have been on a 17-game basis. And what's crazy is that in that span, Kyler Murray, or just not in that span, in general, in this past year, Kyler Murray outscored Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, CJ Stroud, Tua Tagovailoa, Jared Goff, and all those guys outside of one, technically outside of 2, played a full season last year, which is once again extremely incredible. And what we keep tending to forget is his rushing upside. Not only does he have that ability, but now he has Marlon Harrison Jr., who is just going to take him to that next level. And they both going to take each other to that next level going into the 2024 season. If you want to play fantasy football right now, go to underdog.com using our promo code LAND, and we can match your deposit up to $250, meaning you can get up to $125 for free in best ball leagues, best ball tournaments, pick'em specials. You can draft myself or so many other people in the community. What we love here are the pick'ems on a week-to-week basis. You know, they have, over or under, or higher or lower when it comes down to the week or to week basis on Underdog. All you have to use is our promo code LAND and get a little bit extra money on us, essentially, when you use that promo code. Let's get straight into the next player. My guy for me that I have been talking about on every single one of our channels in Dynasty and now in Redraft, that is Dalton Kincaid, a guy that has been, in my opinion, going to be getting the majority of these targets and even being the wide receiver 1, over 200 targets, vacant targets that Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis are leaving behind. And what's crazy is that a lot of people have been saying, well, Dalton Kincaid had an underwhelming season, rookie season. It's because it's being overshadowed by Sam Laporta's outlaw of a season. We had an anomaly of a season that Sam Laporta did by finishing as a tight end 1 in his rookie year has never been done before. And if you were to take Sam Laporta never existed, and Dalton Kincaid was the first tight end coming out of the 2023 class, and we told you he finished tight end 11. I would argue a lot of people say, well, that's a breakout year for what he did, and he wasn't even utilized in the first half of the season. Okay, so keep that in mind when you are drafting Dalton Kincaid, who is currently going as a tight end 5 in the community, going around 6 or 5, 6, or 7, depending on your leagues, and maybe you play on a tight end premium. There are 2 tight ends, like I mentioned, Mark Andrews earlier in this video, and also Dalton Kincaid, that are 2 tight ends that are must drafts going into this year. The king is back. Yes, Derrick Henry is my next player on this list. He is now with the Baltimore Ravens, who is clearly a run-first offense. And what's exciting about this is that Derrick Henry is going back to his old ways. Keep that in mind. The Tennessee Titans last year was changing a lot of things up, and we saw a decrease in Derrick Henry's efficiency. But the reason why we saw that decrease is because he wasn't getting the 25 plus tokes on the ground that we were hoping and expecting from Derrick Henry in the years past. So people saw that inefficiency as Derrick Henry getting old. No, we're just used to him getting 25 plus touches a game where he has more opportunities to improve his efficiency. Coming now to the Baltimore Ravens, who had Gus Edwards, 4th overall in touchdowns amongst running backs, finished with 13 touchdowns this past year for Gus Edwards. There is no doubt in my mind Derrick Henry can do that in his sleep. Once again, with a run-first offense with Lamar Jackson, and keep in mind, Lamar Jackson did, lose a little bit of weight so he could be a little bit more mobile. But why? So he can hand the ball off a lot more to Derrick Henry. Remember, going into 2023, he got buffed because they were unsure if J.K. Dobbins was going to be healthy. They were unsure if Gus Edwards was going to be ready. Even Justice Hill was dealing with injuries all in the offseason and coming into the 2023 season. So what did Lamar do? He put on some more weight. He takes off the weight now because Derrick Henry is here and he's going around RB10, RB11 in the community. And that's around late 2nd round pick in your redraft leagues or underdog leagues. I genuinely believe he has the opportunity to finish as a top 5, top 6 running back, And I think he is deserving of going as an early 2nd round pick in 2024 drafts. Going home to the New York Football Giants, my first and only rookie on this list, Malik Neighbors. Yes, Malik Neighbors is a guy that you should be going out and trying to acquire and drafting, because why? He is going to be demanding targets in this offense. Yes, Darren Waller has retired. Saquon Barkley is gone. Daniel Jones is coming back off of that ACL tear, and we haven't seen the history of Daniel Jones ever producing fantasy relevant wide receivers. But you tell me who Daniel Jones had to make that happen. Wan'Dale Robinson, who tore his ACL this past year, Jalen Hyatt, who was just drafted, Darius Slayton, who has always just been just the guy on this offense. We had Richie James at a time, Kadarius Toney, Isaiah Hodgins, who we picked up off the street. I mean, Daniel Jones never had a talent like this in the wide receiver room. And now Brian Dable drafting the Malik Neighbors, which I would say could be the Stephon Diggs to Daniel Jones, like we saw in Buffalo with Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. Not saying Daniel Jones is going to be this crazy, phenomenal quarterback like Josh Allen, but what's exciting is that we know how he's going to be utilized, and he's going to be peppered with targets in Mike Kafka's offense. And for him to be a low-end wide receiver 2 for you with the ceiling as a high-end wide receiver 1 already as a rookie coming out of LSU, and we've known the history with these LSU wide receivers, with the Jamar Chases and the OBJs, genuinely, the list goes on. It's exciting here. And for you to get him on ESPN as wide receiver 24 or sleeper as wide receiver 20, Underdog, he's going around wide receiver 22 as well. That might have changed already. Look, Malik Neighbors is a phenomenal value and somebody that you should be drafting going into the 2024 season. All right, my second to last player on this list, Joe Moneybag Mixon, a fantastic running back that you can be getting at a phenomenal value here. Because why? They let go of Devin Singletary last year, and we saw the uptick of production from Devin Singletary in the second half of the season. He signs a long-term contract, but a lot of people have been, having a negative spin on Joe Mixon. Why? Because of people have been saying, well, the Texans don't run the ball as much. I agree. But let's compare it here. The Texans versus the Bengals in 2023 alone. The Texans in 2023 were the 25th, bottom 7th in rushing attempts in the league. The Bengals in 2023 were 30th, bottom 3 in attempts, in rushing attempts. Even with that little attempts, Joe Mixon was still successful. Why? Because he was on a high-powered offense that was ran by the Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and the list goes on. Now he's with the Houston Texans, who's also on a high-powered offense with C.J. Stroud, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell. They're going to have to be honest more in the secondary and not stack the boxes like we've seen in Cincinnati. And what does Joe Mixon rely on? The opportunity in the air and those goal line opportunities. And who was worst at getting those goal line opportunities last year and making most of it? Dameon Pierce. I mean, do you remember Dameon Pierce? Every time we get on the goal line, he'll run the ball, he gets stuffed in the backfield. He'll run the ball, he couldn't punch it in because he just didn't fit this offense. Joe Mixon is a little bit of both. He's a guy that can catch the ball, and he's a guy that can punch it in on the goal line. And this is why Joe Mixon right now, as an RB15 in Sleeper and ESPN RB11, and on Underdog, he's around that range as well as RB13. I can easily see Joe Mixon finishing as a top 10 running back at the end of the 2024 season. All right, and my last player on this list, I bought you 10 players today. So make sure you drop a like, and hopefully you stayed to the last part of the video. If you have stayed to this part, let me know about them Knicks, baby. All them signings, Obi-Wan Kenobi staying with us. That's what I like to call him. Cooper Kupp is the last guy on this list. Phenomenal value. And we know we've seen Puka Nacua going in the first round. Cooper Kupp kind of averaging late third, middle of the fourth round here. And a lot of people are undervaluing Cooper Kupp because of the Puka Nacua hype, which I completely understand. But we have to take into account what Puka Nacua did when he was on the field, Cooper Kupp specifically, and we saw more of a downtick for Puka Nacua and more of an uptick a little bit for Cooper Kupp. This is going to be a split backfield or split, I guess, wide receiver room where both of these guys could be fantasy relevant on any given week. And I would personally rather be paying the value of Cooper Kupp, who I can see at times outscoring Puka Nacua on a week-to-week basis, but though that return on the fantasy finish would be a little bit closer than what we're expecting, than being a 2 to 3 round difference in your league here. So you can see, specifically for Puka Nacua, when Cooper Kupp was out, he was averaging 21 fantasy points per game. But when he was in, he was averaging 15.7 fantasy points. That means Cooper Kupp was eating into that workload and getting those opportunities. 18.9 fantasy points has a 3-point drop is significant, especially in the first round. So getting Cooper Kupp at this value, not only we know the history of success for Cooper Kupp, but we also know that he has Matthew Stafford throwing in the ball, and he is going to be a huge part of this offense. Guys, once again, 10 players that I am excited, must-have players going into all of my best sport or home leagues. Comment down below any players that I've missed. Maybe I should do a part 2 of this video. Maybe some that you agree with or some you don't agree with. And as always, it's all love.
Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.